and welcome everyone. So tonight, the subject is tzitzit and Tallit. And here's one. Okay, so actually, we'll discuss some of the gematria, and what is particularly interesting to me is why we tie the strings the way we tie the strings.
You mean
And
the knots?
I'm sorry?
Do you mean the knots?
The knots? Yeah, well, you
when
tie
make
the
it
strings into knots.
into knots.
And my understanding is for a talit to be a talit, it needs what is called an atera, which is some kind of a band. So here it's just colors. Quite often it will have the prayer on it. So you know which side. Apparently there is, I don't remember where I read this, but it's, so you know which side is up and which side's in and which side's out. And then on each of the four corners of the talit, you have what are called tzitzit. And I will hold them up. We're going to be talking a lot about this. And the tzitzit variously translated as fringes or tassels. But the fringes are not to be confused with what you also see on many talitot, which are, just decorative fringes. So anyway, that's the basics of a talit. Any comments people would like to make about talit before we start diving into some of the material?
So your blue fringes are just decorative fringes?
Yes, they are not. They have no. Yeah, they're actually black.
Black.
Yes, they're completely decorative. The halachic, the traditional ones, are the white ones, and we'll see also the issue of the cord of blue, which is an interesting subject on fringes. And the blessing that you say is a mitzvah blessing. And then it's lahita teif batzitzit, which means to wrap myself in tzitzit. Alan, you were raising your hand.
You're going to cover the customs of when you wear a talit?
Yeah, I think it's in the article, and if it's not covered, we can discuss it. Stephen.
Okay. Usually, although not in the particular case of the one you're showing, it's white cloth with either blue or black stripes. Although apparently, since the one you just showed was a different color, it doesn't have to be.
Oh, it doesn't have to be at all.
But is there any significance to the color schemes, and are the ones with blue stripes and the ones with black stripes different in any way in terms of what you use them for?
No, I'm trying to. Oh, hang on. Here's one that someone made for me. I counted. I think I have 13 talitot in total. So here's one that someone made for me, which is kind of a rainbow tallis. Okay, so it's basically white, and it has colors of the rainbow. And I actually, this is a friend who wanted to make me one, and she asked me what would I like, and so I mentioned this, and I was thinking of Jacob's coat, but I once used it to officiate at a wedding, actually a same gender wedding, and they appreciated that I was wearing a rainbow talit, and they presumed that it was a talit specifically for same gender.
Rabbi,
yes,
in a Torah we know it mentions that you should not mix wool with does that apply to the talit?
No, and in fact what we're going to see in the article, depending on how much we get through to it today, there are traditions of specifically mixing, namely that the cloth of the talit will be linen and the tzitzit will be wool, and it seems to go against the Torah. And the logic is it's similar to the clothing that the high priest wore, which also mixed the two. So it's a little counterintuitive and interesting. So any other comments, questions? Okay, so I am going to jump into first a little PowerPoint, which I presume you can see on gematria. Yes, okay, there's Cheryl.
I just had a quick question about the linen and the wool thing. Yeah. So is it possible that the prohibition on wearing linen and wool is an unstated reason, but it is that it is for the priesthood only, or
Yeah,
holy
so
orders
actually,
only?
rather than my trying to remember what it said, we'll read it. We'll read about it in the article. This article that I have actually discusses that, and it's, yeah, it's interesting. It's a clear commandment not to mix, but also I believe in the Torah text, it's specifically in describing the clothing of the priest. It describes a mixture, and anyway, we'll get to it. So, what I want to do is first do a little bit of PowerPoint. On the this is from a class I teach on Kabbalah, and as you know, one of the ideas in Kabbalah is that everything is deeper in meaning than you think. So the question is, one of the ways in which secrets of the Torah are contained is in something called gematria, and gematria is probably from the Greek word for I don't know, for numbers or but anyway, so here's the Hebrew alphabet, and the simple gematria is simply letters from 1 to 10. Aleph to Yod have values from 1 to 10. And then the next letter, Kaf, instead of being 11, would be 20. So 11 would be Yod Aleph, 10 and 1. It's kind of like Roman numerals. And then it goes by tens up to 100. And then we have 200, 300, and 400. And that's as far as the Hebrew alphabet gets. And then I have to say that I had a program of a gematria calculator, and this program pointed out that there were something, I'm guessing, like a dozen systems. So another system would be Taf would be 1 going backward, and Aleph would be 400. And then there are systems where you square the numerical value of each letter and add them up. And then, you know, so if you can imagine it mathematically, the rabbis were looking for deeper and deeper secrets in the text. So, for example, most of us know that particularly in the Ashkenazi world, there's a tradition of sort of giving in units of 18. And the reason is 18, the gematria for 18 is Chet Yud, 8 and 10. And so, and the Hebrew word is chai, which means life. So as a life-affirming gift, 18. I have to tell you, when I met Sonia, we would start discussing things like this. In her world, I'm projecting that it's Sephardi in general, but maybe not. She had never heard of this tradition of 18. In the Sephardic world, it was giving in units of 5, 5 standing for a chamsa. And many of you know the tradition of wearing the chamsa, which actually has Muslim origins. So again, we're very influenced by cultures in which we live. So basically, Hebrew letters, kind of like Roman numerals, have numerical values, and we use this all the time. Like Tu B'Shvat is Tet, Vav. 9 and 6 is the 15th of Shvat. So, but you would think, well, why wouldn't they use Yud and Hey, 10 and 5 for the 15th of Shvat? Anybody know the answer to that?
It's because it spells out God's name.
Yes, because it spells Yah, Yud, Hey. So whenever they're writing 15, it's always Tet, Vav, and in some cases they'll even worry about well, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, Tu B'Shvat, Tisha B'Av, Tisha is the 9th of Av, so it would be Tet. Okay, so sorry.
Why are there no letters for the sounds that in English are the letters F, J, and W?
Okay, the Hey without a dot in the middle is pronounced as an F. The word that comes to mind may not be one that you know so well, but the word for end is sof, and the pei with a dot in the middle has the sound of a P, like po. Po means here. There is no W sound in Hebrew or Yiddish, and the J sound, there's also no J sound in Hebrew. And there's also, what is it? God, though, there's no soft G sound. Like
So
George.
that's soft G and J are the same sound.
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
kind
Okay. So
That one
and there's
twice.
also no. There's a bunch of sounds that don't exist in Hebrew. Just like the sound doesn't exist in English. And there's different ways of writing it in Hebrew, because even though there's no J, you know, you're going to write the word Jacksonville, Florida. So if you want to write it in Hebrew, you write it with a gimel and then an apostrophe, a large apostrophe. But it's a very good question. And by the way, there is, you know, bet and vet are the same letter. It's just a question of whether there is a dot in the middle. For a few letters like bet, and depending on Ashkenazi and Sephardi, there's different pronunciation, and pay, there's different pronunciations of the letter if it has a dot in the middle. Whether the letter has a dot in the middle is a grammatical artifact. It's not, it's the same letter. It's just whether it has a dot in the middle. Okay, I don't want to necessarily get too deep into that. So,
Rabbi,
yes.
I don't know if this related to gematria, but if you look at Exodus 3.14, and the gematria says, but the numbers don't jive with it, because that 3.14 is an infinite number.
No.
And
I have no.
He's referring to pi 3.1415.
No.
Yeah.
I understand about pi, but
Obviously, you're a
but
physicist.
verse 14 of Exodus 3 is not an infinite number, and it's not.
Oh, but they say that that's why it is in an important place in Torah, because God is an infinite.
I like the idea, but it's not gematria. But
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, it's not. I wouldn't say it's gematria. Gematria, I think, has to do. I would think has to do with the numerical values of letters. So let's look at the Tallit and the Tzitzit. So as I mentioned, the cloth, well, the whole thing is called a Tallit, and these long fringes are called Tzitzit. And the way a traditional Tzitzit are wrapped is you have four corners, you have a hole in the corner, you make a double knot, and then you do 7 windings, and you can look at the, you can look at the tzitzit. If any of you have a talit in your hand, you can count them. And then there's another double knot, and then there's 8 coils here, it's described, or windings, and another double knot, then there's 11 coils, then there's another double knot, and then there's 13 coils, and there's another double knot. Okay? And actually, we'll see the text in the Torah that talk about tzitzit, and the idea is when you look at the tzitzit, you're supposed to be reminded of the commandments. So the question is, how is the winding reminding us of the number of commandments? I mean, here's a wide variety of tzitzit. If you go to Ben's Tallit shop, he sells lots of different talesim and tzitzit, and you can see the blue thread here. I'm trying to look for a traditional one. This, I can't even find a traditional one here. There's lots of different ways to wind it. Chabad has their own way of winding it. The Sephardim have their own way of winding it. And clearly there's a lot of others ways of winding it. Alan.
You just used the word talisim, and earlier you said talitot. Are they different?
They are both referred to the plural. I think talesim is Yiddish, talitot is Hebrew, but
Okay,
I will slip and use them.
Right. It's not about, well, it is about Ashkenazi versus Sephardi.
No.
It's about Yiddish. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I thought it was. I thought with it's a plural gets an mem or a tav is based on whether it's a masculine or feminine noun.
Well,
Generally,
yeah,
that's true. It's not always true, and I don't know enough about the specific grammar. I can't even tell you. I don't know if our Hebrew. Yeah, Debbie's there. Debbie,
Yes,
is
I'm
talit
here.
masculine or feminine?
Feminine.
Feminine. So the plural of talit would be talitot. Right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
have you heard the word Talaisim? Is that just Yiddish?
Yes, it's Yiddish.
Okay, so that's the
But
answer.
if you want to know a little different, but if Sam is here too, you can ask him about if they pronounce it differently or said it differently. Sam, do you hear me?
I can hear.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you fine.
We said in Sfaradi, Talitot.
Right. And then and I think Talaisim, which I grew up learning, I think that's Yiddish.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And I think it's a different word because it's not just simply the Yiddish way of pronouncing Tallitot. Probably Tallitot would be, I'm not even sure. Anyway, I'm not going to go there. Anyway, but I will use those two terms simply because I grew up with both of them. Okay, so here's the basic idea of the gematria of the Tallit and tzitzit. So first of all, you have the word tzitzit, Sadi Yud, Taf. Sadi is 90, Yud is 10, Sadi is 90, Yud is 10, Taf is 400. They add up to 600. There are 5 knots in each tzitzit, and there are 8 strings in each tzitzit, so they add up to the 613 mitzvot. Okay, but wait, there's more. If you order before midnight, I will tell you 2 more secrets about the tzitzit. So the first group of windings is 7. That's many numbers in Jewish tradition, are tied to 2 things. 7 is used a lot. It's the number of days of creation. The second group is 8, the number of days in Brit Milah. Brit Milah is circumcision. A baby boy is circumcised after 8 days, and that's meant to be sort of symbolic of completion in the baby boy's life. If you're speculation on why the 8th day
I thought it's 6 days of actually creating, and then the 7th he rested.
Yes. So but he created the Sabbath on the 7th. So, but anyway, it's 7. The sum of the first 2 groups is 15, which are the first 2 letters in God's name. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Yud is 10, Hey is 5. The third group is 11. That's the last 2 letters of Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Vav is 6, Hey is 5. And the fourth group is 13. That's the gematria for Echad. Aleph is 1, Chet is 8, Dalet is 4. So the total number of windings, 39, is actually the value of Adonai Echad, the key phrase, the last words of the Shema. One more comment, and I'll call on Bryce. And Echad also, the Aleph is 1, the 1 Tallit. Chet is 8, the 8 strings in each tzitzit, and the Dalet is the 4 corners of the Tallit. Bryce.
Now, I just want to address something for Stephen in kind of answer to his point, and it's only slightly, I think, facetious, but some of it's partially seriously, and that is that you define creation in such a way as that you get 7 in order to make everything else work out.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure what everything else working out means.
Well, I mean, like you want to get 15, then you have some other number for the number of days.
Oh,
if you
they could have used 6 and 9, but
yeah, but then you got to find something else.
But as you know, 7 is used quite a bit in Jewish tradition.
Yes, it's a Middle Eastern thing. 7, it's a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. Jerry.
Yeah, we know that Talaisim or Talitot, or however you want to say it, is for those who are B'nai Mitzvah or reach the age, I guess, of 13. But there are children that wear tzitzit on a plain white garment under their clothes. What is that called?
Yeah, it's called a Tallit Katan. And the commandment is to wear the tzitzit, and children and adults will be typically boys, and we're going to talk about the male-female difference in the article. You're supposed to wear them all the time, and they're supposed to be seen. So one issue, as I understand it, is because they're supposed to be seen. It says when you see it, you will remember the commandments. So the rabbis decided this is a daytime commandment, and positive daytime commandments in Jewish tradition are obligatory on men and not women. Children under the age of 13 are not obligated to mitzvot, but in, I would say in Orthodox communities and ultra-Orthodox communities, you will commonly see children wearing tzitzit. And I should have a picture of one of these. It looks kind of like an undershirt with no sleeves, but it has four corners. And basically what's going on here, the commandment says when you wear a garment of four corners, you should attach tzitzit. Well, most of us right now are not wearing garments of four corners unless you're wearing, some kind of cape. So the idea is, because we are mitzvah obsessed people, and of course in the mystical tradition, every time a Jew does a mitzvah, a little bit of the universe is healed. So because we're mitzvah obsessed, we will want to fulfill this mitzvah, even though we don't normally happen to be wearing four-cornered garments. So if you're very traditional, you put on this four-cornered garment all the time, and a less traditional, or in addition, you would wear it for prayer, so you can fulfill that mitzvah as well. So good question.
Have you ever worn one?
A talit katan?
Yeah.
I have bought them more for teaching purposes. I've never worn them as a religious discipline.
Wow.
Okay. Oops. Oh, yeah, that's not what oh no. Okay. So that's all I wanted to say about the gematria of tzitzit. And now, can you see the article now? The Torah, what do tzitzit? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Stephen, go ahead.
I thought in a previous one of these, you told us that Yud Hey Vav Hey is just the way we represent it in order to avoid using the actual spelling, which would be using God's name in vain or something. But that it's, in any case, why is it based on the gematria of Yud Hey Vav Hey and not based on the real name?
Okay, it's actually, what you're saying is a misunderstanding. Yud Hey Vav Hey is God's actual name. When we come to it in prayer or in the Bible, we say Adonai, not Yud Hey Vav Hey. So Yud Hey Vav Hey is understood to be God's actual name. Okay. Okay. So there's a nice article on tzitzit in Torah.com. And so let's just dive in. Who would like to read? Actually, I'll read the introduction. What do tzitzit? Sorry?
It's the W that I was thinking of. That's a way of that to get that's not the
yes, yes. So sometimes in prayer books, instead of writing Yud Hey Vav Hey, they will write a double Yud. And the only comment I can't remember how they came up with that, but one comment I like is someone observed that when two yids get together, like two yuds get together, God is present. But I don't remember. It's a good question. I don't remember the actual origin of using a double yud to abbreviate God's name. But double yud would just be 20. Okay. What do tzitzit represent? What is it about tzitzit that recalls all the commandments of God and makes you observe them, as in Numbers? While the rabbis emphasize the importance of tzitzit, academic scholarship sheds light on what such a feature would have meant in an ancient Near East context. So we're going to read. It's actually worth taking a look. I'm even going to blow this up a bit. Whoa. So you can see it a little better. We're going to read about a blue string or purple string called Tallit. And, on the tzitzit, on most of our garments, or most of our talisim, talitot, it's all white. And we're going to read in the article why that is true. But this is a good example of one with a blue thread. And let me get back to center. Okay. So, good. So would someone like to continue reading at Rabbinic Judaism? Joanne, you can read, but you have to unmute.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Rabbinic Judaism attaches great significance to the commandment to add tzitzit, fringes, to the corners of garments. The section about tzitzit in Numbers 15 must be recited twice a day as part of the Shema, the central prayer of the liturgy and one of the earliest midrashic collections. Sifrei Zutah 15 claims that the commandment of tzitzit is as important as all the other commandments together, and he who regularly wears tzitzit is considered as if he observed all the commandments.
So I just want to comment here. There are lots of places in rabbinic tradition where it says this mitzvah is equal to all the other mitzvahs, mitzvot. You know, I think it's their way of just overemphasize or dramatically stating what they consider the importance to be. I don't, you know, I wouldn't think it's wearing tzitzit is as important as not murdering, for example. Okay, let's
The
continue.
Midrash connects this teaching to the dramatic way that the Torah introduces the mitzvah. You shall look at it and recall all the commandments of the Lord and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. Thus you shall be reminded to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God.
Okay, so when in the Reform liturgy, when we recite the V'ahavta, we skip a lot of sections that are included in the traditional liturgy. And one of the things that Reform liturgy traditionally skips is actually this section, which is actually part of a traditional V'ahavta, except we have the very end. And, you know, maybe I'm overdoing it by playing with the... So this one will sound familiar. L'man tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kadoshim lelochechem. So we actually have included that because that's generally about mitzvot. And the interesting thing here is, yeah, you can just about see it, that unlike many mitzvot, like wearing a garment of wool and linen, or which animals are kosher and which animals are not kosher, tzitzit are one of the few commandments, or I'd say one of only a few commandments, that where the text actually tells us the reason. It says you shall look at it, and we're going to see actually later in the article, it's going to play with this word, vari'item oto, which means you should look at it. But vari'item oto can also mean you will see. Ra'item means you'll see. You will see him, mainly God. So it can have both of those meanings. And then it also it says you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. V'lo tituru acharei levavchem, so you won't follow after your heart. V'acharei einechem, and after your eyes. Asher atem zonim achareihem. Zoni is the word zonah is a word for prostitute. So the idea of lustful urge is actually built into the text here. So Alan.
This has to do with that final part, the Laman Kisaru. And correct me because I might probably wrong. That may have been in the prayer book through Gates of Prayer and earlier, but I recall it started to be added, this final couple of verses.
Oh no,
no, go ahead.
No, it's been in every Reformed prayer book. I mean,
no, it's in the prayer book, but in normal worship, it's felt to me there's some point where the Reformed services added that, and it wasn't there as long as I can remember back.
It's as long as I can remember back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bryce.
Well, it's really odd, and it's maybe a trick of my ear, but when you were saying the Hebrew and chanting, it almost, I thought I heard the word Satan.
No,
okay?
Asitem.
Asitem. Okay.
Yes, yeah,
Asitem.
it has nothing to do with Satan.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I heard it, and I'm sure.
Okay.
I know it was a mishearing, and I wanted to know what it was.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, good question. Okay. Joanne, why don't you continue?
The Torah here asserts that just looking at the tzitzit, or perhaps at the techelet colored thread, has a salutary effect on those wearing tzitzit, causing them to remember all the mitzvot and to observe them. As the Talmud describes the process, seeing leads to memory, and memory leads to action.
And again, I'll remind you, the B here refers to Babylonian Talmud, the tractate is Menachot, and the page is 43b.
The experience of rituals and the comprehension of their value are meant to lead to loftier ethical and religious behavior. But what exactly are people supposed to see and think about when they look at the fringe on a garment?
Okay, let's continue.
Rabbinic interpretations. Rabbis over the ages attach different meanings to the idea of looking at the tzitzit. These include reminder of the Shema, a Talmudic passage, a Babylonian Menachat 43b suggests that wearing tzitzit reminds one of the Shema. Look at it and remember. Look at this mitzvah and thus recall another mitzvah connected to it. Which one? Reading the Shema.
Reciting.
Reciting the Shema. The mechanism here is simple since tzitzit are mentioned in the third paragraph of the Shema. This would then come full circle since reciting the Shema would remind someone to wear tzitzit. Reminder that Jews are God's servants. Another interpretation offered by Rabbi Hezekiah ben Manoch is that seeing the tzitzit reminds Jews that they are God's servants, since they are keeping his commandment and thus increases the likelihood of their compliance with God's other commandments. Greeting the face of God. Another explanation of the function of looking at the tzitzit is offered in Sifrei Numbers 115.
Sifrei is a midrash on numbers.
The verse teaches us that those who observe the mitzvah of tzitzit, it is as if they have greeted the face of the divine presence, Shekinah, for Tallit is the color of the sea, and the sea is like the sky, and the sky is like the divine throne. The connection of this midrash to phrase
V'ra'item oto
can be understood in two different ways. The midrash may be reading the word
oto
the same way that the previous explanations did. Look at it. Alternatively, the midrash may be reading the phrase as more audaciously understanding
v'ra'item oto
as meaning look at him, equal God. This latter understanding of the phrase apparently underlies another Talmudic passage. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, whoever is careful about observing this mitzvah merits greeting the face of the Shekinah. For here it says, you shall see Oto, understand here as him. And in another passage, it says in Deuteronomy 6:13, revere only the Lord, your God, and worship Oto.
Okay, so this is again Hebrew. For Hebrew doesn't have a word for it. Look at it. Everything is gendered in Hebrew, so everything is either masculine or feminine. So oto, while it can mean it, if we're referring to an inanimate object like tzitzit, it would be a perfectly good translation in English. But it also can mean him, and if we understand him, it can mean God. So that's the way the commentary is going here, because the word oto is clearly used in other portions of the Torah as referring to God.
In his Talmudic commentary, Rashi makes this anthropomorphic idea of seeing God explicit. Here it says, you shall see Oto, and in another passage, it says worship Oto, just as in the second passage. Oto refers to the Shekinah, so also here Oto refers to the Shekinah. In other words, the verse itself is interpreted as containing an explicit reference to seeing God or God's presence. Particularly before the days of Moses Maimonides, many Jews saw no difficulty in interpreting biblical verses as saying that God or God's presence was something that could be seen.
Okay. Whoops, Erwin has your virtual hand raised and seems to have stepped.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I am confused because I learned when I put tefillin on. First, I have to put Tallit on and do the
Right.
blessing and tefillin. But many times I see people, especially when Chabad guys are on the street, put tefillin on. They don't put the Tallit on.
Oh, you'll have to ask the Chabad guys. I think what you're referring to is probably a sort of a custom of putting tefillin, and the tefillin, everybody I hope knows, are the little boxes you put on your head and your arm. That normally you put on the talit first and the tefillin second.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure why that's true, but with Chabad, they actually want people to put on tefillin. And I'm not sure, it's an interesting question. Why tefillin and not a talit? Because clearly the underlying idea is to get Jews to do mitzvot. Because again, the mystical idea is that when a Jew does a mitzvah, a piece of the universe is healed. And the only thing I can think of is the tallis is too easy. You say the blessing, you put on the tallis, and you're done. Whereas tefillin gets a little more involved, and it may arouse, the interest of the person in the street that the Chabadnik has stopped and is going to ask them to put on tefillin, because chances are that person has probably worn a talit before, but the chances are also that that person has never ever worn tefillin. So that may be the reason why when the Chabadniks do that, they go right to the tefillin. But
maybe it's enough for them to wear the katan.
No. But they're talking what Erwin's talking about, and if you are male and you've been to either religious sections or in Israel, you will see Chabadniks stopping people and asking them, "Have you put on tefillin today?"
In a shopping center in Tel Aviv, even.
Yes, yeah.
Shopping center in Agora.
Yep. Or in Jewish festivals, you'll see it quite commonly. Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
So this order of events seems like there's something wrong with this picture, the way I'm understanding it. If I put on my talit first, my talit is going to cover part of my arm, and it needs to come after the tefillin. Otherwise, how can I put the tefillin on when I have the...
I mean, the simple answer is, I'll put on my talit. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'tei b'tzitzit. And this is a small talit, but you would be wearing it so your arm's exposed. See that?
Why did you just make the blessing now, even though it's only a mitzvah during the day? And since there's no mitzvah to do it at night, you're not really doing a mitzvah. And
because I'm the rabbi, and I decided to do it. And that's actually the honest reason. But whenever I've put on tefillin, basically your talit is kind of hanging here, and so it's easy to get to your arms.
Okay, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yep.
Seems like it doesn't cover the tefillin up far enough up your arm. Okay,
no,
got it.
Because you put the box about here, and then you do the wrapping. I have actually, when I was bar mitzvah, it was a conservative synagogue, and they taught us to put on tefillin. And I have actually taught Reform rabbis how to put on tefillin, because in their history and their training, they were never exposed to putting on tefillin. Okay, the other thing which I think is kind of interesting and worth mentioning is this idea of seeing God. There are a couple of places in the Torah where it says you can't see God and live. And there's another place in the Torah where Moses, Aaron, and the 70 elders see God and are just fine. And so, I mean, this is the first time I've come across this idea that before Maimonides, Jews didn't have any trouble interpreting like this, of seeing the face of the Shekhinah or some idea of God. Maimonides, of course, is very Aristotelian and said, I can't remember if I don't think it's in this article. He said, basically, God has no physical form. God is purely spiritual. Before Maimonides, there are lots of, anthropomorphic references to God as having physical form in the Bible. Okay, there you go, Joanne, if you want to
The
continue
seed
reading.
saves a person from sin. Rabbinic literature contains a number of stories about people being mysteriously or miraculously saved from sin, particularly sin of a sexual nature, by seeing their tzitzit. This explanation is based on the claim of the Torah that looking at the tzitzit causes you not to be led astray.
Yeah, I won't reread the Hebrew.
So that you do not stray after your heart and your eyes in your lustful urge.
There are lots of interesting stories where a guy is going, a great sage or rabbi is tempted and goes into a brothel and is undressing and is wearing a tzitzit, and when he sees his tzitzit, it saves him from visiting the prostitute. And then there's even some stories that the prostitute is so impressed by the fact, because she's been paid in advance and she's the most expensive and wonderful prostitute in the land, that she can't imagine what was it about this Jewish tradition that caused the man to react this way, and she actually becomes a Jew. And so there's some good stories. Actually a little disappointed that this article. Yes.
Does she refund his money?
That's not in the text. Yes. Go ahead, Erwin.
Shekhinah is God's lover.
So the word Shekhinah in the Bible means God's presence, and it's not characterized as a male or female. It is a feminine word, but Yah is a feminine word also. And it's only in the mystical literature that the Shekhinah is I would say allegorically referred to as God's bride or lover. So yes, that's
she is with God in the holy and holies, no?
Yeah, so that's again in mystical literature, but certainly not in the Torah, and I don't even think in the Talmud is you have this sense of a feminization or a feminine aspect of God. Okay, so Joanne, you're doing a great job. You want to continue noting that?
Sure. Noting that people most frequently wear tzitzit on their prayer shawl, for the custom of wearing a separate garment, a tallit katan, under one's clothes is relatively late. Abraham ibn Ezra, in his Yesod Marah V'Sod Torah, drew attention to the problem involved in this. A person who wears a tallit in synagogue has not fully performed this mitzvah because it is actually an obligation all day long. When he is in the market and sees forms, that is, pretty women, his heart will be led astray by his eyes more than while he is praying. I mention this because I have seen many people who do not fear God, but they wear a tallit for their own honor.
Okay. I personally can't imagine that if you're being led astray by your urges, that the tallit is going to stop you, but that's the tradition. Okay, I shouldn't say that. Go ahead, Tzitzi.
What's the seat of all things? Aside from the mystical explanation that the tekelet of tzitzit reminds us of the seas and of the heavens and of God, rabbinic literature has little to say about why tzitzit would remind the Israelites to keep God's commandments. Rashi, for example, needs to have recourse to numerology in an attempt to find meaning in tzitzit.
So numerology is a good translation for what I've been calling gematria.
The tzitzit will remind one of all the commandments because the numerical value of the letters of the word tzitzit is 600, and there are 8 threads and 5 knots in the fringes, so that you have 613, which is also the number of the commandments of the Torah.
Now, so, Rashi's fairly late, I think 11th century or so. So you don't, I don't think there is reference to the specific way of tying the tzitzit in the Talmud, or if I've looked for it and I haven't been able to find it.
Modern critical Bible scholarship moves the discussion into a new direction. The importance of the ancient Near Eastern hem. In 1981, in an article titled The Tassel and the Tallit, Jacob Milgram showed how ancient Near Eastern literature and art teach us the importance of the hem of a person's garment. It is an extension of its owner's person and authority. The more important the individual, the more elaborate the embroidery of his hem. Milgram draws our attention to the scene in 1 Samuel 24:3-21 when David cuts off the hem of Saul's garment and later feels remorse for doing so, while Saul concludes, "Now I know that you, David, will indeed reign." What was the reason for David's remorse and for Saul's response? The answer rests in the meaning of the hem. It was an extension of Saul's person and authority. David felt remorse for taking it because God had not so ordered. Saul, however, regarded it as a sign from God that his authority had been transferred to David. He was now cut off from the throne. At times, hems were so unique that the impression of a hem on a document replaced a signature. Thus, when Tamar demands that Judah leave with his identification, she asks for his seal, his staff, and his cord tassel.
The Hebrew is patil, and I don't know how that's connected to tzitzit or talit, but clearly, I don't know if you remember the story, but basically, another prostitute story. Jacob, no, Judah, sorry, not Jacob. Judah is celebrating the harvest, and he goes to a town, and his first two sons have died after being married to Tamar, and he's reluctant to let his third son marry Tamar. So he, in violating Jewish law, doesn't allow his third son to marry her. And so she actually dresses up as a prostitute and lays with him, and he has left his his Israelite Express card at home. So he says, "I promise to pay you back. I'll send." I think you're supposed to pay him a couple of sheep or something, and so he leaves as a deposit with her his seal, his staff, and his cord or tassel. So this is the first time I've ever heard this idea that the cord or tassel is equivalent to the hem of his garment. So let's continue with the discussion. I think it's interesting.
Tzitzit are a way of extending the hem. The significance of such an elaborate hem lies in this. It was worn by those who counted it. It was the idea of nobility. In his Anchor Bible commentary, Adlock, Baruch Lavin points out the similarity between the Hebrew word tzitzit and the Akkadian word for ornament, sisatu. E.A. Spicer has suggested that the practice in the synagogue to this day of pressing the edge of the talit to the Torah scroll when it is carried around or read is a relic of ancient customs relating to the hem.
And you may know this is a custom that when the Torah is carried through the congregation, that one way of acknowledging the Torah is you gather either all four or one of your tzitzit, touch it to the scroll, and bring it to your lips. Okay, continue this idea.
All Israelites are aristocrats. If tzitzit turned those who wear them into members of the nobility, Israelites who wear them, following the command of the Torah, should see themselves as aristocrats and understand that their lofty status comes from God. This is possibly what the Torah means by seeing tzitzit and being reminded of God's commandments. The meaning of techelet. Milgram explains that the techelet thread on the tzitzit functions similarly. While there are many suggestions as to what precise color techelet is, Milgram sees it as dark purple blue, a color associated culturally with royalty. We know that there was a well-developed industry in Lebanon and northern Israel for making purple dye from the helazon, a type of snail. Purple dye was expensive, so wearing purple clothing was often a sign of nobility. The Torah assumes that every Israelite would be able to afford a thread dyed with purple blue. However, as Milgram writes, the Jewish community following the 2 Roman wars in the 2nd century was so impoverished that many could not afford even the 1 blue dyed cord, and thus the commandment was fulfilled beginning then without the Tallit thread. As a result, the precise formula for making Tallit was lost. For most of the last 2,000 years, Jews fulfill this mitzvot without the Tallit thread that is an intrinsic part of the Torah's description of the mitzvah.
Yeah, so again, most of our Talitot don't have the Tallit thread. And if you go to Ben's, Tallit shop, you will find that they sell tzitzit packages. And I think I may have mentioned that one of the things I used to do with my B'nai Mitzvah families is have a Tallit making program where we would there was a company that had designs that you could trace onto a white cloth, and then we'd punch a hole in the corners, and then everybody would tie their own tzitzit. And you can buy regular tzitzit. I think I checked Ben's website, and you can buy it for about $4 per package. That would be enough for 4 tzitzit. And it goes about 4 or 5 times that amount if you want a Tallit thread. And then there's all kinds of different packages according to different traditions and levels of holiness and or observance, I should say. But you can today find Tallit threads without any problem at all. Okay. Whoops, there's odd noises going on. Okay, so now let's talk about what somebody asked about shatnez. The word shatnez means a combination of linen and wool. Shatnez in tzitzit.
Shatnez in tzitzit, a priestly mix of wool and linen. In addition to the importance of an elaborate hem and the use of Tallit thread, Milgram explains a third aspect of the nobility, aristocracy explanation of tzitzit. The classical rabbis already noted that tzitzit either often are or perhaps are supposed to be shatnez, made from the forbidden mixture of linen and wool. They assumed that the Israelites' garment itself would be made of linen, and the added threads or tassel would be made of wool. They found support for this idea in the juxtaposition of 2 verses in Deuteronomy 22. You shall not wear cloth combining wool and linen. You shall make tassels on the 4 corners of the garment with which you cover yourselves.
So this is kind of a classic rabbinic technique, because there's no connection between these 2 verses other than the fact that this is verse 11 and this is verse 12. So what the rabbis are saying is, because of the combination, that's implying that you can make the combination shatnez. I mean, I don't. The logic for me is not there at all, but that's what they're doing.
They explained that the second verse was an exception to the first. You are not allowed to wear clothing combining wool and linen, except when you put tassels on your clothes. Milgram agrees with the rabbis that tzitzit involve an infraction of the rules of shatnez. Why this exception? Milgram argues that the shatnez is forbidden to Israelite commoners as it is reserved for the priestly class in Judaism, some of whose clothes are, according to the instructions in Exodus 28, made of a combination of wool and linen. Only on their tzitzit may Israelite commoners have shatnez. It is a conscious attempt by the Torah to encourage all Israelites to aspire to a degree of holiness comparable to that of the priests. The fact that the cord is woolen and blue marks it as a symbol of both priesthood and royalty, thereby epitomizing the divine imperative that Israel become a priestly royalty and holy nation. Milgram concludes that tzitzit is the epitome of the democratic thrust within Judaism, which equalizes not by leveling, but by elevating. All of Israel is enjoined to become a nation priest.
Okay. And I think we're going to press ahead. I think, although we'll run over a little bit, try and finish this article.
Women and tzitzit. Are some Israelites more equal than others? In the 21st century, it is challenging to see the mitzvot of tzitzit as epitomizing democracy and equality, since in almost all Orthodox and conservative synagogues, talitot are worn exclusively or predominantly by men. But an examination of early rabbinic texts shows that that has not always been the official rabbinic position. The Talmud sees
Just read you can just pick up at reports.
see also records that the opinion of the majority of rabbis was that women were obligated to wear tzitzit to the same extent that men were. The Talmud relates that 1 century sage, Rabbi Judah, used to attach blue dyed fringes to the aprons of the women of his household. Only 1 century rabbi, Rabbi Shimon, was listed as exempting women from the commandment of tzitzit. Forbidding women to wearing tzitzit. Medieval rabbis generally adopted Rabbi Shimon's position. Most ruled, though, that women were allowed to wear a garment with tzitzit if they wished. Some medieval authorities ruled that women who wore tzitzit could recite the blessing praising God,
which is just the one I mentioned, Asher Kachanu b'mitzvotov v'tzivanu lehitatef tzitzit, batzitzit.
Who sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to wrap ourselves in tzitzit. Others disagreed. By late medieval and early modern times, many rabbis actively opposed women wearing tzitzit. For example, Rabbi Jacob B. Moses Molin, Macharil, Germany, provides us with evidence that some women in his days still wore tzitzit, but he writes, even though I have seen women wearing four-cornered garments with fringes, and still today there is one woman in our neighborhood, it seems astonishing to me and is arrogant of them. They are fools. In the last few decades, liberal Jewish writers, even some from Orthodox circles, have advocated for Jewish women to again observe the commandment of tzitzit, basing themselves on the early rabbinic texts.
Wow.
Tzitzit and democracy in the eyes of a Gentile. Interesting support for the claim that the mitzvah of tzitzit democratizes and equalizes is found in a book written by a fellow Semitic French Catholic, Aimé Pallier, a lover of the Hebrew language around 90 years ago. Pallier traces the beginning of his own positive attitude to Judaism when he was 17 years old and happened to visit a synagogue in Lyons in the final hours of Yom Kippur as the Nila prayer was being recited. Looking back as an adult, he describes his early impressions. The spectacle of that large number of men assembled, their shoulders covered by tallis, suddenly disclosed to my eyes a far off past. On seeing the prayer, shawls uniformly worn by the participants in the service, I felt that in a way they were all officiating. In fact, in the synagogue service, all Jews are equal, all are priests, all may participate in the holy functions, even officiate in the name of the entire community when they have the required training.
Yeah, I'm going to try and, let's see, video. I'm going to try. I was looking for this picture and it occurred to me I may have it as a background. No, I don't think this is it. Let's see. Yeah, this is it actually. So I think you can see if you look at my image, you can't see it well, but this I took early on Shavuot morning in Jerusalem as Jews were gathering literally at sunrise for morning services. And as you might guess, I don't know if you're seeing my pointer here because I'm actually
not seeing
yeah. As they're gathering, basically all the men have white talitot. So it's the sea of white, which was just really magnificent. And it made a big impression on me as it did on, okay, that ends the discussion. There's lots of footnotes. Let me stop sharing. Yeah, so again, this is probably not I thought I had a better picture of this, but I couldn't find it. So, good. I'm glad we finished this. Next time we are going to be discussing actually an article about the rabbinic voice, not the rabbinic, the prophetic voice in Judaism. But any other comments about tzitzit and talit? Yeah.
Not specifically, but you probably want to shut off the recording per your new rule.
Per my new rule? Nah. Well, okay, I can shut off the recording.
I don't care, but there was a logic that you explained when you switched the screen. Your screen. All right. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things I will point out, though, Alan, while you were speaking, there's a flag of Israel behind you, and it's worth noting that the design for the flag of Israel is based on the Tallit. In the discussion in the Zionist Congress over 100 years ago, trying to design a flag for what would become the Jewish state, I remember the language was that we already have a flag, the Tallit. So they took what is a pretty standard depiction of a Tallit, which is basically a white garment with blue stripes, and they put, of course, the Star of David in the center of the Tallit.
So, Rabbi, just a comment. So I noticed a few times, I guess she was at the Women of the Wall, Rosh Chodesh, since October 7th, instead of lifting a talit as part of it's usually like a chuppah, not a wedding, but a bar mitzvah, they've been using the Israeli flag.
Okay, so
instead of holding up a talit on four corners,
when they're bringing in a Torah for probably a bat mitzvah.
Yeah, bat mitzvah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So, but they may have done it before that. It just became more noticed since October 7th.
Yeah, one of the things it's a very good point. I don't know all the laws relating to what is a chuppah cover, but it is. You'll see beautifully decorated chuppah covers, which are inscribed with words about weddings, and I've officiated weddings where the same chuppah has been used for multiple generations, and someone will embroider the chuppah with the names of all of the people who have been married under that chuppah. Actually, at ordination, there's a beautiful, when I was ordained, it was under a chuppah, and my point is, though all of those chuppahs are not talitot, namely they don't have fringes attached. Actually, I bought, when I was in Israel, a very large talit, and it actually is probably too large for my body. But I have since used it for just about every wedding that I've officiated at where they've asked me to bring a chuppah. And as you know, Alan, the Israeli flag has been, adopted even before October 7th by the sort of the protests against the government have been using the Israeli flag to emphasize that, they are loyal citizens of Israel. They're not, on the right or on the left. Actually, a friend of mine today, it was yesterday, commented seeing a golf cart flying an American flag, saying that it's a shame, and I don't know if people agree with this or not, but it's a shame that sometimes people flying an American flag, the American flag tends to be associated with the right rather than the left. And I think in Israel, there is a very conscious attempt not to do that. Not exactly on the subject, but it's worth mentioning. Any other thoughts?
Well, looking at the synagogue, which side do we place the Israeli flag? Which side do we place?
I don't remember. Alan?
That answer is governed by the United States practice of where you put the American flag. Okay, so in America, I shouldn't speak for Canada or other countries, but I know specifically the American flag is set in public display in front of a stage or bima is defined by the U.S. government. I shouldn't say the government, but the laws that we follow, and the Israeli flag goes on the other end.
And that applies when you have honor guards, displaying state flags and local flags and so on. I think that's right. And I don't remember which side it is, to be honest. And I know in some congregations there has been controversy about whether we should be displaying an Israeli flag at all.
I've been through that. I know.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, that sort of underlies the issue about whether Jews and Judaism have a unique and special attachment to the land of Israel. And I guess to the extent, you know, it's an interesting question. Does the flag of the state of Israel with a Mogen David on it, does that represent the people Israel, or does it represent the state of Israel? It clearly represents the state of Israel. Yeah.
I would add that what you were trying to convey earlier, and I think it ends up being a problem in some synagogues, is the flag symbolizing something of politics.
Yes.
Where I think you and anybody in general may be politically inclined differently, but the flag is a nationalistic, or whatever you want to call it, representative of the country. It shouldn't be treated as in that way of being political.
Right.
But it does. It sometimes does, of course.
Yeah. So, you know, Reform Judaism went through a period when it was anti-Zionist, when the idea was that the thesis was Judaism is a religion. It's not a nation or a people. And I would say Reform Judaism went through that, and there was debate and controversy about that until the Holocaust. And after the Holocaust and with the formation of the state of Israel, I don't know. There may be Reform rabbis who are anti-Zionists. I don't know any. I know clearly there were Jews that are anti-Zionist, but I don't know of any Reform rabbi who is anti-Zionist. But I could imagine it would occur to, you know, or a controversy. Well, and not only can I imagine, but it is the case that I've had people in congregations where I've been the rabbi object to the idea of having an Israeli flag. And the objection is usually not so much stated as being anti-Israel, but as being, you know, we're American, the only national flag we should be displaying in our synagogue should be the U.S. flag. But most congregations I'm aware of have both flags.
This isn't, if I can tell a quick story, this isn't about the flag. At Shereth Israel, a big Reform synagogue in San Francisco, has stained glasses up above the upper levels of the pews. And there's a picture of Moses holding two tablets. And this has been there since 1904, by the way, just for the record. But in the glass behind Moses, or the symbol of Moses, it's not a picture of a mountain like Mount Zion. It's specifically the outline of Half Dome of Yosemite. And the idea was the Holy Land, the Promised Land, I should say the Holy Land, the Promised Land is America.
Yeah, and I would say that was, I presume that synagogue has been a Reform synagogue from that time.
It's always been Reform, and it's kind of an it's a sort of a place to check it out, because I don't think that's a common way in which the Promised Land is described.
Yep. Okay, so yes.
Rabbi, I have a question. I have somebody who's interested in joining the group. Do you want me to send their name to you?
Yes, but make sure they pay in advance.
Yeah, I told them.
Yeah. Yes, if you or they send their name to me, I will add them to my emailing list.
Okay.
And I should say, look, we have what now? There's 19 folks in the group now. My mailing list, both for Monday nights and Wednesday nights, are about 150, 160 people. And occasionally people will say, you know, I want to be off the list.
So I should just add, I'm going to be in Israel at this time for this class, and I'll only join if my jet lag gets me up at 5 in the morning. So I won't see you guys for a couple of weeks.
Well, I'm not going to see you guys till in March, because I leave in 12 hours for Hanoi.
Hanoi, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Super.
So I'm going to be on a plane in 12 hours.
Okay,
First heading to Tokyo.
For both of you, Nesia Tova. Good trip.
Safe travel.
Bye.